So today, we're going to look at the fifth and sixth day of the creation account. But before we do that, I just want to point out something to you. When Moses received Genesis from God, remember God revealed Genesis to Moses. Moses is the human writer of Genesis. So when Moses received Genesis, and he received Genesis 1, the creation account. The creation account in Genesis, and I want you to understand this, the creation account in Genesis contradicted the prevailing worldviews in the world at that time. Just about every verse in Genesis 1 confronted the prevailing worldviews that societies held and cultures held in the ancient world. It contradicted the popular worldviews of the day regarding the origins of the universe, life on the earth, the origin and purpose of mankind. Genesis 1 undermined what every ancient society believed, and it flew in the face of everyone's worldview in the ancient world. Genesis 1 flies in the face of the prevailing worldview today. But I want you to understand that we're not the first generation that is confronted by Genesis 1. We're not the first generation to be sitting in a church studying Genesis 1, that God created the heavens and the earth. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and immediately, we know that, most of our culture doesn't believe that and doesn't agree with that, and most of our culture thinks that is unscientific. It's been that way since the beginning, since Genesis was first given into the world in world history. So we're not the first generation in human history confronted with this choice of believing the Bible or believing popular opinion of the day. So I just want you to know that. Now, let's get into the text, looking at the fifth and sixth day of creation. If you remember, on the first day, God created the earth initially formless and empty, and then God gave the earth form. He gave the earth structure for life. He created the sea. He created the sky. He created the land. And then He filled the earth with life. We saw on the third day that God created the grass, the herbs, and the fruit trees on the land according to their kind, fully mature, bearing fruit. On the fourth day, He created the celestial bodies, the sun, moon, and stars. And now we come to the fifth day, and on the fifth day, God created the sea life and the birds. Again, fully mature, fully able to reproduce. We see in verse 20, "Then God said, 'Let the waters abound with an abundance of living creatures.'" This phrase, "abound with an abundance," means literally swarming swarms. Let the waters swarm with swarms of living creatures. And instantly, poof, the oceans, the seas, the rivers, they're just swarming with swarms of living creatures. "And let birds fly above the earth across the face of the firmament, the expanse of the heavens of the sky." So God created, notice what it says here, so God created great sea creatures. You can stop right there. So God made a point here in Genesis 1 as He's going through this creation account and He's talking about creating the sea life. He makes a point in verse 21 to single out the great sea creatures by name, which means there must be a specific reason why God tells us in particular He created the great sea creatures, because He doesn't do that with anything else that He creates. He just creates birds, right, and animals. But here it's Hey, and he created the great sea creatures. Now, why does he do that? Well, I just told you that Genesis 1 flew in the face of the prevailing worldviews in that day. The Canaanites, they worshipped the great sea creatures as gods. They believed the sea creatures, the great sea, the whales and large sea life, that they were deities, and they worshipped them. But God says, no, the great sea creatures are not gods, they're created by me. And see what he's doing here? He's taking the Canaanite worldview of what they say is God, and he's stripping it of its divinity. And saying, no, it's not a God. Your worldview is wrong. What you believe is wrong. I created the sea creatures. I created the great sea creatures. Verse 21, so God created the great sea creatures and every living thing that moves, with which the waters abounded according to their kind, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And I mentioned this last week, that phrase, according to their kind. It allows for variation, it allows for adaptation within a species, but it does not allow for one species changing into a different species. Birds produce birds, fish produce fish. And God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let the birds multiply on the earth. Again, the ability to reproduce is built into the creation, so that God doesn't have to keep recreating. Now it can reproduce on its own. And so the evening and the morning were the fifth day. So now we come to the sixth day, the final day of the creation week. And on the sixth day, God created the land animals, and then finally he creates human beings. Verse 24, and then God said, let the earth bring forth the living creature according to its kind, cattle and creeping thing and beast of the earth, each according to its kind. And it was so. And God made the beast of the earth according to its kind, cattle according to its kind, and everything that creeps on the earth according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. So God creates the land animals, and he created three categories of land animals. He created cattle, which this word that's used here for cattle means more than just cows or bulls, as we would use the word cattle today. The word includes any domesticated livestock. So it can include sheep, goats, rams, and so on, whatever can be domesticated. And so according to the Bible, from the beginning of creation, animals were domesticated. You had domesticated livestock. The next category, creeping things, animals that move, low to the ground. This can include animals with legs, without legs. We could put reptiles and amphibians, insects into this category, and so on. Creeping things. And then finally, the third category, the beasts of the earth. This would be wild animals that cannot be domesticated. And so God creates, three classifications of the land animals. We see these three classifications again in chapter 7, verse 14. We see these three classifications again in Psalm 148, verse 10. One important thing for you to note about the classification of the land animals is mankind never appears in any classification of animals in the Bible. Mankind never appears in the classification of animals in the Bible. Human beings are not part of the animal kingdom according to God. That is evolutionary thinking. That's evolutionary scientists who classify human beings as part of the animal kingdom, as mammals like other mammals. But God doesn't do that. According to God, mankind is a unique, special creation, unlike the rest of creation. Human beings are in a category by themselves in creation. Humans are the culmination of God's creation. Humans are the crown of God's creation. Humans are not merely animals or more highly evolved animals. They are in a class by themselves in the creation. Classifying humans as part of the animal kingdom, or as just mammals among mammals, that is not, listen, that is not a biblical worldview. That is a secular worldview. That is an evolutionary worldview. And I know the culture we live in, and some of you are scientists and work in the scientific community, and you got to talk the language of the scientific community. I understand that, but that's not a biblical worldview. That's a secular worldview, to say that man is just an animal, or that man is just a mammal like other mammals.